Hi, I'm Phil Cooke, and I'm thrilled that you've joined me on this episode of the Phil Cooke Podcast. I've been talking in the past episodes about my book, Ideas on a Deadline, How to Be Creative When the Clock is Ticking. If you don't have it, you need to get it. But one of the interesting things about the process of writing the book was the research I followed and studied on creativity, particularly creativity under pressure. Now, one of the things that I saw was I remembered back over my career, because I've led creative teams that have I've led creative teams that have been, all over the world, that have been filmmakers, studio television producers, and artists and designers and writers, all kind of things. And I've developed a lot of pet peeves about the way people create things they do in a lot of different areas. And on today's episode, I want to talk about a list of 5 pet peeves that I have with social media creators. And I don't mean to drive any social media creators off. I don't want to upset you. But at the same time, I think these are really good points. It's going to be a short, to-the-point episode, but this is really important. And the truth is, you don't have to be a social media creator, professionally to gain something from this. You could be a leader, maybe an executive or a pastor or a nonprofit leader. You could be just a regular creative person who is involved in social media at some level, even your own, because I think all these points are going to be really important for you to understand as well. So stay tuned, because I think today's 5 pet peeves on social media, about social media content creators, is going to be really something that you need to pay attention to and may change your perspective a little bit on producing social media. When I wrote my book, Ideas on a Deadline, How to Be Creative When the Clock is Ticking, I uncovered some really interesting things about creativity, particularly some pet peeves I have with a lot of creative people, a lot of the ways they work. Over the years, I've led creative teams, and they've been filmmakers, TV producers, designers, camera operators, all kind of people. And over the years, you start collecting pet peeves. And then I realized there's a handful of pet peeves that social media content creators have, and things that drive me up a wall. And I wanted to maybe share that at the risk of maybe driving off, maybe making some enemies of some of you social media people. But whether you're a leader, you may be an executive, a pastor, a social media creator, or someone that works on the team from a creative perspective, I think these 5 or 6 areas will be really interesting for you. And I hope, let's go into it with a good heart, because I think my reasons are good. Number one of my pet peeves is that social media content creators often get obsessed with analytics. Let's talk about that just for a minute. Analytics, they're great. I get it. I know what they are. They're a measurement. They help us understand where we've come from, where we're going. I think they're really, really important. However, I'm in meeting after meeting after meeting where all the team wants to talk about is their analytics, and nobody's talking about the really bad posting they're doing. Nobody's talking about the fact that they're not telling a story well. They're not engaging the audience very well. They're not reaching out to people and responding to people. Analytics can be powerful. They can be important. But very, very often we get so obsessed with analytics, it's about numbers. Now, here's the deal. I know you've got a boss. That may be a pastor. It may be an executive or other leader who you've trained to want to see analytics. After all, they want to see progress. They want to see something concrete, and analytics are a great way to do that. However, we just cannot forget the fact that we're out there telling a story, we're sharing our message, and we're trying to engage with people, and it's not all about analytics. Now, I've often said with social media, I'd rather have 100 people following me that really supported me, believed in me, wanted to engage with me, than 100,000 that just didn't care. So it's the people we're reaching really, really does matter. So I know in the situation with your boss, you've trained him or her to expect big time analytics. So you're going to have to spend a little time detraining him or her to understand that it's not all caught up in numbers. And if you can do that, trust me, on the other side, it's really fantastic. You can be more creative. You can be more engaging. You can tell better stories. It's so much better than simply analyzing your social media outreach via analytics. The second pet peeve that I have about social media is we tend to use it just as a megaphone. It's a one-way conversation. Most social media people that I encounter are talking in a church situation, for instance. They're blasting out the information about the next church service, or they're showing a clip of the pastor's sermon from last week, or they're putting a nice verse over a sunset. It's a one-way conversation. It's not really meant to engage people and start a social event. I mean, it sounds trite to say, but social media is social. And we very often forget that it's a two-way conversation. I know when I talk to influencers here in Hollywood, they tell me that they don't ever post unless they're sure they have 30 minutes to an hour afterwards to sit there and respond to people who've responded to their post. So we forget that we need to be going back and forth. And particularly leaders, this is a difficult thing. I know pastors who post and never look at it again. They post and walk away. Executives post and walk away. Now, sometimes they have their social media team go in and try to respond, but it's just not the same. So I think it's important that we remember that it's a two-way conversation, not just a megaphone. We need to engage people. And by the way, first of all, I would say, what if we started engaging with people first instead of just making all these announcements first? I mean, Dave Adamson, who you all know, my old friend Dave, is a great guy. He's been a guest on my podcast. One of the things that so impressed me about Dave's strategy is he started reaching out to his geographical area looking for hashtags like new in town, hashtag new in town, or hashtag moving day, or hashtag depressed. And he started reaching out to those people. And I remember when he was at North Point Church in Atlanta, he told me, Phil, you have no idea how many people attend this church today because I reached out to them through social media. So let's think about engagement, not in terms of the way we normally use it in social media, but real engagement with people. I think that's so very, very important. Third pet peeve about social media for me is we just don't know how to tell a story. Now, I can tell you from spending most of my career in Los Angeles, here in the heart of Hollywood, I can tell you that I know people here who have spent their entire career studying storytelling, and they're still learning, they're still growing, they're still figuring it out. Remember, storytellers are some of the highest paid people in Hollywood, and it's incredibly important skill and an art. And yet, we rarely take the time to actually learn the techniques of telling a great story. People like Robert McKee and other writers have written books on how to tell stories more effectively. And we need to be reading them. We need to study them. I don't care what creative platform you're on. You may be a video producer, you may be a designer, you may be a social media creator, you may be a pastor, you may be a writer, whatever you do. It's all about telling an effective story. Now, here's the irony of all this is so many social media creators on their bio, on their social media bio, it says, I'm a storyteller. Well, I'll tell you, they may call themselves that, but in most cases, they're terrible at telling stories. We just need to learn how to engage people through stories. I think it's one of the reasons the Bible comes alive and has for so many centuries. It's because of the power of stories. So as a social media creator, let me tell you, take the time to learn how to tell effective stories. How to engage with people through stories is so incredibly, incredibly important. The fourth pet peeve I have is that I think we just play it too safe. I think we play things too safe. There's something out there I call confrontational creativity, maybe confrontational communication. It's the idea that we need to be more provocative in what we're posting, in the questions we're asking. I mean, you have to admit, in today's culture especially, there's a lot of questions that need to be asked about the direction we're going. And I'm not talking about being a jerk. I'm not talking about trying to start a fight or even being controversial. Just ask tough questions that force people to think differently. I think if there's one thing I could recommend over all the other pet peeves, it's this one. Learn how to do that. Learn how to push the envelope a little bit. I mean, when was the last time you posted something on social media that you sat back and thought, before I hit the post button, should I do this? Maybe this is a little too far. I think we need to wrestle with those questions every once in a while. I mean, in this culture today, there's so many areas, so many issues that we need to be asking questions about. And if we're not doing it on a regular basis, I just don't think we're causing people to rethink their preconceived ideas. Be a little bit more confrontational. Be a little bit more provocative. Again, it's not about being a jerk. It's not about starting a fight. It's just asking hard questions, tough questions that make people stop and think, whoa, I've never thought of it that way before. If we could do that, that would have a huge impact out there. Number 5 is I don't think enough social media creators have a real, genuine, unique, authentic voice out there. One of the things I've learned from being in the media for so many years is that the people in the organizations that get noticed are not the ones that are pretty good at a lot of things. They're people or organizations who are extraordinary at one big thing. I wrote a book about it, One Big Thing, Discovering What You Were Born to Do. I believe so strongly in that you really, in today's distracted culture where, remember, research says the average person sees about 10,000 media messages every single day. How do you cut through that? You cut through that by being known for your unique and authentic voice. I tell directors when they come to Hollywood, look, if you want to come here and just be a director, you're competing with everybody. Quentin Tarantino, Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, you're competing against the big boys. But maybe you come out and start thinking about a niche, or niche, as some people say. Maybe you start thinking about that narrow little niche, like, for instance, a certain budget level, a certain style, a certain type of story. Whatever it could be, focus on that. That increases your chance of standing out. It's kind of, it sounds counterintuitive, but the more you narrow it down, the bigger audience you have the potential of reaching. I think in many ways, Jack Hayford was a good example for me. Jack was a pastor that we went to Jack's church on the way for 20 years raising our daughters. And I've heard Jack preach sermons on 100 different things. I mean, hundreds of topics, subjects. But everything Jack preaches, he preaches through the lens of worship. I've said this before in some context that, think of it. If you cut Jack, he would bleed worship. He's written 5 books on worship. He's written 100 worship songs. He didn't just preach at our church. He led worship for 20-some years at our church. He was a horrible voice, but he was a fantastic worship leader. He understood it. And as a result, no matter what he preached on, it could be salvation, it could be evangelism, it could be missions, it could be finances, family, anything. He did it through the lens of worship. You figure out what that lens is for you, and you start viewing the world through that. What are you called to do more than anything else? What would you do for free? If you could never be paid for it, you'd still have that strong, powerful urge to do it. What is that thing for you? For me, it's the intersection of faith, media, and culture. That's where I live. I don't blog or post much about sports or much about any recipes or anything else. I post about the intersection of faith, media, and culture because that's where I feel called and that's where I love to be. I think if we can figure out that unique voice for each of us, it would make a dramatic difference. Now, let me close with a little story because I don't want this to sound cheesy or over-spiritual, but I think this is really significant. I had a pastor, I talk about engaging with people and going back and responding to them after they've responded to you. And I had a pastor that called me recently, and we'd worked with him a number of years ago, worked with his church, our team here at Cooke Media Group. Great guy, tremendous pastor of a pretty good-sized church on the East Coast here in the U.S., and he called me, and he said, Phil, I know all these years you've been hammering on me about responding to people who are responding to posts I do, but he said, generally, I'll just post something on on Facebook or Instagram or wherever, and I just walk away. I don't really see what happens. He said, however, last week, I posted something, and a woman, it was a theological point about some issue, and a woman asked me a question. She just came on and responded with a question about the Bible and its validity, and he said, I just felt led that I should respond to her. So I did, and we had a little conversation, and it was Facebook. He said we had a little conversation back and forth on Facebook for a little bit about that issue. And he said, lo and behold, to my surprise, that Sunday she showed up at church. And he said, again, to my surprise, at the end of the service, she came forward and accepted Christ. And then he said, the next day on Monday, to my surprise, I learned that she'd been killed in an auto accident. Now, even he said to me, Phil, I know that sounds overly spiritual and cheesy, and I don't want it to sound that way, but he said, it really showed me that there are real people out there. Those are not analytics. They're not numbers. They're actual people out there. And I understand now that what if I'd never responded to that woman? What if I'd never answered her question? Obviously, we can't respond to everybody that responds to us or answers, ask questions and things online. But the truth is, had I not responded to her, what would have happened? I just want to tell you and remind you what you do matters. If you're a social media creator, if you use social media in any capacity as a leader, what you post matters. It's not about trivial, little Bible verses, on top of a sunrise picture. It's not about clips of the pastor's Sunday message. It could be. But I would encourage you, think more about these issues. Think more about confronting people with tough questions that matter, that make them think in a completely different way. Because if you can do that, you'll go from being a social media creator to a real, genuine voice out there that could impact today's culture. Hey, thanks for joining us on this episode. I'm so grateful that you even come week after week after week, month after month, and listen to these episodes. I think we put a lot of effort into these things, and even though I try to be casual and off the cuff, it takes a lot of study and a lot of preparation, and I appreciate you joining and being a part of this. Again, I've been talking about my book, Ideas on a Deadline, How to Be Creative When the Clock is Ticking, because I think creativity is so important, and the truth is, it's not just about creativity anymore. It's about creativity when you've got the pressure of a deadline looming over you like a monster. Every one of us have due dates. You may have a presentation due on Tuesday. You may have a teaching plan you have to have for next week. You may have, for pastors, I always say, Sundays come with relentless regularity. So whatever we do, if you're a creative person, you've got that design that's got to be done. Whatever it is, you need to learn the techniques of how to be creative when the clock is ticking, when the pressure's on, and when that deadline is looming. So this is the book for you. And I just got a great email from a church media director in Tennessee, and he told me that he's bought multiple copies of the book. He's going through it with his media team, and I think that's a great idea. If you have a creative team, if you're working with a creative team, get a copy for everybody. And in fact, if you reach out to us at info@cookmediagroup.com, Cook with an E. We'll give you information on ordering bulk copies at a discount. So we'd love to do that for you. And so thanks so much. Again, give us a rating on this. Share this with your friends. Today's episode on social media. I'd love for you to share it with people out there so they learn how to really elevate the content and the creativity they're doing in their social media career. And I'll see you next time.